Hi, my name is Diane Mayer Christiansen. If you visited this site before, then you know my story. If you haven't, I'll tell you a little bit about who I am. I'm an author. I write young adult fantasy novels. And I also grew up struggling with the neurological disorder dyslexia. And my struggle was really hard. I really did not read efficiently until I was in my late 20s. And so I had a really hard time getting through school. In fact, school was really not a place I looked forward to going to. I was the kid that was always teased or made fun of. So if you're visiting this site and you're a kid and you're struggling with this disorder, just know that I've been where you are. And it does get better, and it does get easier. You just have to believe in yourself, really, and not listen to what other people are telling you. So today what I've decided to do is read my book, Switcher, here it is, online. And it's really for anybody to tune into, but especially it's for kids with severe dyslexia. I found that if I listen to a book on audio tape before I read it, it makes it a little bit easier to actually read. And Switcher is not available on audio tape, so I thought this would be a really great venue for kids to tune in, and I'll read a chapter each time, and you can just kind of tune in and follow along listening. And then if you are interested in buying the book, it's available on Amazon.com. If you can't afford to buy the book, that's okay. A lot of times if you ask your local library or you ask your school library, they're willing to buy the book. So you can try to do it that way, or you could just tune in and listen to the audio tape. And unfortunately, I'm not editing this, so there goes my phone. I'm not going to answer it. This is going to be a completely unedited process. But I just want you to know that as I read this, it's not going to really be that easy for me. One of the worst things that I ever was asked to do is to read out loud. And if you struggle from dyslexia, then you know that. And so, there may be times when I have to stop or slow down. Even though I wrote the book, there are parts in here that I don't always remember accurately. And as you know, if you struggle with dyslexia, our memories are not that great. So, I'm going to try to do my best, but bear with me. We're all in the same boat, so, I'll do the best I can. So, and then the other thing I do want to say before I start reading is I would love to hear your story. So if you are a kid and you're struggling in school with dyslexia or any learning disorder, send me an email. I'd love to hear from you. My email address is on this site. It's also on my Switcher website, but the email address is switcher@live.com. So I would love to hear from you. Okay, so let's go ahead and we'll start with the first chapter of Switcher. And I will do my best. Okay, Chapter 1, The Hewitts. The Schmeely family was normal enough, at least as far as they or anyone else they knew were concerned. They lived a quiet, tranquil life for the most part. There were their strange neighbors, the Hewitts, of course, who lived a mile off and were, strictly speaking, very nice people. Stanley and Susan Schmeely lived on a smallish farmette out in the country with their daughter Samantha. And they all loved the quiet life, free from gossiping neighbors or door-to-door salesmen. The closest city was Chicago, and though it took several hours to drive there, they did manage to visit once in a while, enough to know that they preferred their slower pace. It was all rather perfect, that is, until the night that Samantha's parents discovered her shocking secret. It was a warm night in June, as Samantha Schmeely jumped down from her bed and began to wander aimlessly around her room. It was late into the night, and the only light that she could see was emanating from outside somewhere, though there was a slight dimness coming from her bedroom nightlight in between the door and the cluttered chest of drawers against the wall. She curled up on the soft pink fuzzy rug at the foot of her bed and glanced around her room in the shadowy haze of midnight, thinking about the lazy days ahead. Samantha, or Sam as her friends and family knew her, loved summer vacation. Within the first week she had already become habituated to staying up hours past her normal bedtime and to waking closer to lunch than breakfast. She also loved spending long sunny afternoons lounging down by the creek, shaded by the many tall oaks in her backyard. Sam had spent her whole life here among the acres of forest and field. Not that 13 years could be considered much of a life, really, but still. This world around her was all she knew. She was what most people would consider average-looking, with black hair cut into a bob that reached her shoulders, and chopped bangs that always seemed too short. She was also much too thin, and couldn't wait for the day that she would fill out, as her mother called it. There weren't any animals on the farm, really, just a few hens and a rooster, and that was enough for them to have fresh eggs every week. There was an old rusty tractor that her father lovingly called the antique, though it was just really a heap of scrap metal, and there was a rickety old wood fence surrounding the main yard. Sam would often spend hours climbing on top of it and seeing how far she could walk along it without falling. She had broken her arm 2 summers ago performing this stunt, but the next spring she was right back on top attempting it again. Her mother had planted a small garden with a few vegetables and wild herbs, and Sam loved the smell of the lavender as it came into bloom. She stretched out onto her back and closed her eyes. She definitely had a wonderful life so far. Nothing spectacular, of course, but she had good parents who cared about her and a few good friends as well. She enjoyed school and sports and was looking forward to beginning her first year at Middletown High School next fall. Yes, she thought, everything was fine. Normal. Well, almost normal. There were 2 distinct things about Sam that maybe weren't quite normal. First, as an infant she had been struck by lightning, and though she had no memory of the event, she had a round discolored scar the shape of a baseball on her ankle to prove it. Her mother had first told her of it when she was very young, around 5 or 6, when she had questioned the mark that none of her friends seemed to have. Sam had been left in her grandmother's care and was taken outside on a summer afternoon to have a nap in the shade when a storm came from nowhere. Before her grandmother could make her way to where Sam lay, the lightning struck, and her grandmother had feared the worst, that Sam was dead. Her mother often told her that she must be the luckiest girl alive to have suffered so little. Her grandmother had died several years later, and though Sam had seen pictures of her hunched-over, gray-haired lady, she never really knew her. The scar had faded over time and wasn't nearly as noticeable now, though in grade school she had been teased relentlessly. By the time she reached junior high, she had made her own group of friends who had their own worries and weren't interested in her scar at all. The second thing that was not quite normal about Sam was that from as far back as she could remember, even before she knew how to stand on her own, she had always been able to somehow transform herself into a sleek, furry black cat. Since she knew of no one else who had this ability, she hadn't told anyone and kept it her own little secret. The transformation was something personal. She only did it in private and where no one would see her. Mostly the cat came out at night. It was safe enough then to roam around the house and view the world from a whole new perspective. She would sometimes leave the back door open just a crack before she went to bed, and then once she became a cat, she would nudge it open with her paw and squeeze through to explore the yard.